welcome to our Soda Social live panel discussion titled ESG Decoded, Creating Green Solutions in Tech. So we have partnered with our friends at Code Institute, and I think most people are probably aware, but for those of you that aren't, we are running a hackathon with Code Institute in conjunction with this webinar. So Code Institute, they are the world's first credit-rated bootcamp dedicating to producing career-ready developers. So we have some learners from Code Institute in this session as well, some of the judges as well on the panel. So thank you very much for joining us. We're going to get a chance to meet this weekend in Dublin for the hackathon. But this can be used as an additional resource to the hackathon as well. So for this webinar, you can expect an hour of panel discussion with a live Q&A at the end of the session. So this will be running for about 45 minutes. Then we'll wrap up with some Q&A, and then we'll also have a networking session afterwards for those that wish to continue the conversation further and want to come and ask some questions and network with our lovely panelists here as well. So, right, okay, so some good results here. I like it because not too many people know what the term ESG means, which means most people are going to be going in fresh to this topic, which often brings out a slightly more creative side of people when it comes to building projects. So we can see here then, so we have 22% have said yes, they do. Then we have 67% have said no, they don't. And then we have around 11% that have said potentially, but not sure. So we will get into that in this webinar. So just for a bit of an introduction, so my name is George O'Connell, and I'll be the host and chair of this webinar. So I work for Trust in Soda and Soda Social by day, and I'm a technical recruiter. I mainly specialize across the software engineering sort of space, but mainly in sort of mobile and JavaScript. And working for Soda Social, it's more of our networking platform where we do meetups, do webinars, and obviously get really involved with the hackathon. So Soda Social, we really aim to connect our network by discussing some really interesting and relevant topics that are impacting our industry. So we also want to make sure that these discussions are as engaging as possible. So if you do have any questions for our panel throughout the webinar, please feel free to ask them in the side panel or in the Q&A section. And we'll get through as many of these as we can throughout the talk. So lastly, before we do kick things off, please note that this is being recorded and we will be uploaded to our Soda Social YouTube channel, where you can also access our upcoming webinars and podcasts, and you can also access the previous ones we've done. I think we've done 4 or 5 now with Code Institute. So there's some previous ones you can go and have a look through there. But now the best part, to introduce our fantastic panel. So we've got 3 industry experts with a clear passion who really want to talk us through a little bit more, give us an idea of ESG, what it means to them and their businesses, and also to support and to give insight to everybody on this call, to give you a little bit of inspiration, ideas, tips, tricks on the best ways to be building this project, and hopefully spark a little bit of interest around the topic as well. So if we start things off, Karen, it'd be great for you to introduce yourself, please, to everybody.
Thanks, George. Hi, guys. My name is Karen Bastin, and I am a lead tech analyst with MasterCard. I've been with MasterCard since 2018, and my background is in technical analysis and software engineering. So I'm really happy to be here with you guys. Thanks.
As are we. Thank you so much. And next up, we have Klaudia. If you wouldn't mind saying a few words, introducing yourself.
Thank you, George. Yes, my name is Klaudia Kazanowska, and I'm originally from Poland, but I currently am living in Dublin. I've been working at MasterCard for the last almost 3 years as a technical analyst. In my role, I am responsible for analyzing some technical errors within an application that we offer to our external clients. Before that, I worked a bit more in a financial industry. I've worked in State Street for 3 years, and I was responsible for assisting clients with their newfound launches and help them trade in different markets in the whole world. In my private life, I'm a huge animal lover. Last year, I've adopted a lovely pit bull named Medusa. And since then, my life has definitely changed, and my life is currently concentrated on her, but I definitely cannot complain. And I'm definitely excited to be here. And thank you, Trust and Soda, for inviting me to this amazing initiative. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Great to be here. And last but not least, we have Aaron.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me today. Yeah, my name is Aaron Shortt. I'm a senior manager at a company called Prove. No harm if you haven't heard of them. We've like 10 people in Ireland. We're all remote at the moment, but we are hiring, which is cool. Before that, I worked for a company called Riot Games. Yeah, that was my first foray into the games industry. And I was a manager there, managing the platform and infrastructure teams and a team called production engineering. And then before that, I bounced around a bunch of different of the kind of headline SaaS companies and some of the big names in tech in Ireland and in Dublin. Workday, Workhuman. If it's got work in it, I've worked for them. Intercom. It's really not much left with work from there. And I actually worked for MasterCard as an intern a very long time ago. On the VASPs team, if I think back a long time ago. I was a graduate from DIT and I was part of their internship program there. So that was my first job out in the real world. Yeah, so delighted to speak to you all today. Thank you very much for having me again, and thanks to the team. And hopefully I can add something.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much for joining us. And yeah, for everybody else on here, you will have a chance to meet them in person, to pick their brains on Saturday. All going to be, in the office in Blackrock on Saturday. So look, without further ado, we'll jump straight into it. So the first question I want to throw out, and Klaudia, I'll come to you first, is, what does the term ESG mean to you? And I mean, how would you maybe describe it in simple terms, let's say?
Sure. So I think we should firstly start with explaining what ESG actually stands for. So E stands for environmental, S for social, and G for governance. So each of those three words are the principle that help companies to define how they're going to be successful in accordance with their sustainable views. So starting with E, maybe environmental factors, they focus on the organization overall impact on the natural environment. So for example, those could be climate change, pollution, water quality, waste management. Moving on to social factors address how organization treats and impact people. Example behaviors would be supporting ethical supply chain, maybe paying fair wages to employees, encouraging diversity and inclusion programs, funding projects for people in need. And then lastly, governance factors. Those are the guidelines on how companies police themselves, focusing on internal controls and practices. And a huge emphasis here is also on the diversity on board of directors, but also having the ethical business practices, rules on corruption, and rules of maybe conflict of interests. And now what ESG means to me. So me as a customer, but also as an employee, ESG is sort of a compass. Nowadays, the price and quality of goods, it's not really the main thing that we look as customers. We also want to make sure that we are supporting a company in which we believe in which the values are the same as ours. And the same really applies to me being as an employee. I want to make sure that I work for the company that has the same value as me. And I have a sense of being proud to work in this company. And I'm definitely happy to work in a MasterCard because I think MasterCard is definitely an ESG leader.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we discussed about it before that yeah, MasterCard is quite fulfilling of a lot of the ESG as well, and we can come on to some of those points as well in a moment. But yeah, for sure, and I think for everybody on the call as well, Klaudia broke it down really quite nicely there, and going into each different point, all different things, to be considering, and sort of little different sub points off of there that she was mentioning under each, like the behaviors, all things to think that you could incorporate, into said projects over the next week. And the next point I wanted to come to, firstly, wanted to give a little bit of data first. So news outlets such as Financial Times and Forbes have spoken about the rise of ESG, particularly in the investment space. So from a tech perspective, has there been a shift in, sort of businesses choosing to invest more in ESG products? And how is that benefiting them? I'll come to you first, Aaron.
So I think the reason why this has been such a natural place for many companies to go is because it's an extension of how the modern software industry has really developed. It hits all the big beats of what the industry as a whole has been attempting to do, which is bring people together in a social aspect, governance and big data, as well as getting a longer view and even predictive or forecasting view of the future. And this has been on the kind of the cusp of dreams for many big software companies. And I won't mention the too much the ChatGPT thing, but that really is a fulfillment of what we could do with such a large body of data. The question remains is, and I think it's the open question, that we haven't really got the killer app yet in the space and the domain. We haven't really hit that thing that's really going to reshape our society in the way some of the more social aspects of ESG have. And I'm not really sure why that is, but it is an interesting domain, and it's an exciting place for people to hunt after. But I think it requires a little bit of thought. There's plenty of big data tools out there already that will be able to pivot into this space neatly. So we need to figure out, well, what will we do with that after we get there, and how much further could we take that data as it pertains to the individual, the company, the government, and really the world, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned there, bringing the data side as well. Is that something then that you've seen, is quite advanced in terms of that? Like, I think we spoke about before, like the pulling the data and revealing that. Is that something that you've seen is going to be, quite influential, sort of pushing this forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think amassing the data has become a lot easier as we've seen the innovations really the past decade or two come to fruition. The space of like IoT has meant we've been able to pull data out of much more fine-grained and granular spaces. Big data lake and anonymization has meant that we can now consolidate this across globally. So even to take something as mundane as the weather, I've noticed has gotten a lot more accurate from the app, even for our little island. They said it was going to be sunny this week, and it is. And I can't help but think that comes from better access to tools to collect the data, moderate it, and then feed it back to the user and the consumer. So to me, that's where I see this dimension of the technology space really driving the most value and growth in the near term. Of course, there's going to be technology like more advanced forms of energy collection, maybe a clean nuclear reactor. Heard everybody talking about room temperature semiconductors all the last couple of months, and they're all really cool, but I'm not solving that problem anytime soon. My bachelor's is in computer science, and just barely, if I'm honest with you. I'm a far field from physics. I don't know anything about tidal power. And I think you don't need to. It's going to be the industry coming together as a whole to figure out what the end-to-end chain looks like when we're trying to be responsible technologists in the future, which is kind of where I think we're heading with this, which is nice.
Yeah, I agree. And, even just bringing in my my side of it as well, it's interesting, from working with different companies as a recruiter. We work with lots of different companies across lots of different industries, but one that stuck out to me as recent is we started working with a company. They're a green bank, and they've built a carbon neutral data center, which for data centers, there's a lot of energy that goes into them. So for them to be building that is awesome. And even just simple things like they're planting, thousands of trees, doing beach cleanups. It's all things that now when I speak to somebody and say, look, I've got this new job opportunity, rather than just being a normal corporate bank, they're like, wow, it's something I'm really interested in. And I think for us, again, it's like seeing these companies starting to do that is definitely moving in the right direction. I think it's, as you said, it's a matter of time before more things start to progress and the innovation keeps coming.
Exactly. And as the industry have shown that it's capable, governments have stepped up and started mandating these things. So green roofs have become a pretty commonplace now in modern metropolitan skylines. You won't see it in Dublin all that much, joys of our skyline, but in places like London, New York, and large metropolitan centres across Europe, we are seeing them move towards green roofs and even purple roofs, where they're trying to capture storm water and use it to create a more pleasing and environmentally friendly place for your building. data center is extremely energy intensive, and it's a net negative in most cases for society, other than what it fuels for us in the technology space. We have to balance that out. But if the actual building itself could be net neutral, it gives us a better starting point. I mean, there was that old trope, wasn't it, that you have to drive a Tesla for 100,000 kilometers before it was the same as your 10-year-old Toyota. We don't really care about that anymore, because Tesla figured out how to make their supply chain valid enough to offset it. It's not completely gone, but we just need to make strides in the right direction. You ain't coding your way out of that problem, though. Some hard physics problems there. But there is ways for us to measure and govern, and that's really what ESG is, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think even just like, I think we were discussing some ideas for projects, is like a potential calculator for that, how much energy is a company giving off, what does that mean to them, and how can they start to improve that, an idea for a hackathon project, something like that, which is cool. And Karen, is there anything that you'd say off the back of that, in terms of a perspective, there has been a shift to investing more in that, how do you feel as though that's possibly benefiting businesses?
Yeah, so like implementing ESG standards in business leads to attracting investors and building customer loyalty and improving financial performance. So the ESG practice drives success, resource efficiency and innovations, leading to waste reduction, energy savings, and cost reductions, and enhancing market competitiveness. So a strong ESG performance correlates with engaged employees who perceive their work as meaningful and contributing to a culture of respect within the organization. So investment management firms are recognizing the risk of inaction regarding ESG, and it's leading them to retool their approaches and prioritize sustainability in decision making to meet growing clients' expectations. So yeah, there's been a shift in businesses choosing to invest more in ESG products.
100%. I think even, it's definitely something I've seen as well, is that, just the amount now, when speaking with companies, that they want to really start to impact that. And I think, if I bring in the recruiting side of it, so many more people now want to try to move into those sort of ESG based companies, or, like a B Corp company, something that is more meaningful. I'd say 8 out of 10 conversations I have now is gearing towards that, of, wanting to have something that has, a positive footprint, let's say. So that's cool. So thank you for those points. Next point I'd like to move on to is a little bit more around sort of, say, like green technology. So something that I'd seen from Medium magazine is that they outlined this year there's been a sort of steady increase in demand for environmentally friendly lifestyles and technologies. But Klaudia, a question I'd pose to you is, what sort of simple but effective ways have you seen tech businesses create products that are positively contributing to our sort of global carbon footprint?
Yes, I think, as you said, people are actually starting to realize the importance of the green technologies. It also became kind of a trend in a lifestyle environment. And I think both companies and individuals, they're seeking methods to decrease the carbon footprint. We want to make sure that the future for our next generation is much more greener, and that we do not make much more harm than we already are. And recently I started noticing some trends where companies are actually planting trees for different activities, and I have few examples of application. I think it also can serve as some kind of an inspiration for the hackathon. So the first simple yet effective idea was a search engine. It's named Ecosia. So for every search you've done on their website, you plant a tree, which I think is a great initiative. And another tree app or tree related application is Tree App. It's also an application where you can choose where you want to plant your tree, and users simply select the planting project they want to support. Then virtually they plant the tree, and then they track the global impact for free. The only thing that user has to do in return is that they have to watch an ad from a sustainable company, which also is not a random ad. It is an app from a sustainable company, which also is interesting. You can find some really nice and interesting companies while planting a tree, so doing something good for the planet. Another small startup that I've noticed was a company named Grow a Wish. So it is another interesting project, I would say. So the company aimed to extend the life cycle of greeting cards. So they invested postcards with plant seeds in the eco paper, so that once you receive a postcard, you can then grow it into a plant and also a long-lasting memory, which I think is a great idea. It's kind of a perk of receiving a postcard as well. So definitely loads of ideas, and they don't really have to be that expensive to be effective, which I think those applications are the example of that.
100%. I think Ecosia is one that I've heard of before as well. Really interesting. I've been fortunate enough. I've met one of the engineering managers there, Jesse. Really lovely person. But for everybody in the chat, it's spelled ECOSIA. Sorry, so Ecosia. And it's a search engine, yeah, as Klaudia said, you can use. And each time you search, a tree is planted. I think they've planted like over 1 million trees already. So yeah, just some ideas, something's more, there you go. Something so simple as a search engine that every time, you post another idea for a potential, hackathon project as well. So Klaudia, thank you so much. Awesome. Then in terms of, moving on to our next point, so still around green tech, I think we have another poll to launch for everybody at home. So I think we'll be launching that in just a moment. Should land on your screens in a second, but for that point, it's all around sort of green tech trends. So you can see it here. Here we go. So what top green tech trends have you noticed? So we've got artificial photosynthesis, we have smart meters, we have carbon capture and storage, we have electric vehicles, we have wastewater electricity generator, we have recycled plastic road surfacing, we have green architecture, as mentioned by Aaron, and then we have other. So if there's anything else, if anyone has any others, feel free to put them in the chat. I think one that I saw recently was the recycled plastic road surfacing, which, it's a very simple idea, right? Plastic, they say, is never going to vanish and takes hundreds of years to. Why not build roads out of it that we need to last for years and years and years? Yeah, I think it's an awesome initiative, and I think it's, yeah, as Aaron came back to the innovation side, that more and more people will keep on unearthing, which will go towards that, which is what everybody needs to tap into over this next week, is the innovation side, and see what we can produce. But I think we'll have another 5-10 seconds on this, and then we will release the results for everybody. Here we go. Right, so electric vehicles, believe it or not, is got 100% of votes. And then we have smart meters, which I'm sure most people are accustomed to as well, having them in their houses. Nice to see the green architecture point as well. And yeah, like a nice mixture of the others. But I always thought electric vehicles might be the top one. We were talking about this prior about Tesla and what they've been doing as well. Awesome. So thank you everybody for the votes. Yeah, I think for the next point then I wanted to really move on to is a little bit more. I mean, Aaron, I'll point this one to you. So what sort of emerging trends do you currently notice when considering green technologies, let's say?
I think the biggest beat I've noticed is trying to, there's two areas that have been really interesting for me, and they're two things I like doing, so it makes sense, right? The first one is we've seen Porsche, which is a prestigious name in the car industry, using what I can only assume is magic to produce petroleum not from oil. So this is a carbon neutral fuel, and that's to keep, they did it not because they want to keep combustion engines going forever. They did it because they recognized that their cars stay on the road statistically longer than every other car brand, and they wanted to continue that trend. They didn't want to be halted by what is represents a huge $1 billion investment for them. Their brand, their their community matters that much. You know, I think it's something like 60% of Porsches are still on the road. Mine's not. I'm just kidding. I drive a Toyota, like everybody else in Ireland.
Yeah.
And we can see this trend pretty much follow all the way down through consumerism. Tools like Vinted and Depop exist now, where even fast fashion is being recycled and upcycled, whatever way you want to phrase it. And I think that those trends, that concept will continue. Where it hasn't really peaked yet is where we can reuse some of the software technology we have now again. And I that's the bit that's exciting for me, or how we can reuse a data center. Because they have a half-life. The roof eventually needs to be replaced, the walls. Every building has a half-life similar to plastic before it needs a huge amount of influx of cash and material to make it net positive again. And if we can find more innovative things to do with those tools, those mechanisms, and extend that into the software world, we're probably on the cusp of something really, really exciting, I think. But this is a hard domain. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be getting the funding it has. So I don't want to trivialize the problem space. But if we think about the mundane consumer things we do now, there's absolutely places where we can flex into as frankly one of the most progressive industries. The software industry is one of the most progressive industries in terms of ESG and really in terms of society of the past 50 years, you know.
100%. And just something you mentioned, not as interesting as software, but you mentioned about sort of Vinted and so on. I remember that Love Island this year have come out and they've completely swapped their sponsors. You know, it wasn't things like Pretty Little Thing anymore. They now changed it to eBay. So eBay is now going back through, like, you know, buying pre-loved clothes, trying to reduce their carbon footprint. I think, you know, big entities like ITV with Love Island, again, leading that from the front. I think, you know, that's something that stuck in my mind. And I think having these big corporations like that leading, you know, to an extent from the front on that side as well is only going to be beneficial, I think, for the wider world. So yeah, thank you for the input there. And I think, Karen, is there anything that you would have to say, or Klaudia, I think when it comes to sort of emerging trends you're noticing around green technology?
Yeah, actually, I would maybe add 2 more examples, if I may. As somebody from more of a financial background, I wouldn't be myself if I didn't add this. So I also saw some emerging markets developments when it comes to the ESG focused investment platforms. I think the investment bit with purpose has gained a decent popularity recently. I think many fintech platforms actually recognize this growing trend and they incorporated the sustainable element into their platform. An example platform would be an Impact. I think it was created by Interactive Brothers, and it is created to help people to invest in ESG responsible funds and customize your portfolio accordingly. So I think it's also a great new feature to see, especially when it comes to ESG. And another example that I would like to mention is the carbon tracking technology. So I think, I'm not sure if anyone knows what it is, but it is a technology that allows businesses to calculate the gas emission that results from each and every activity that the company does. And there is a good example from MasterCard, actually. MasterCard has created a carbon calculator with a Swedish company, actually. I think the name of the company is Doconomy. So this calculator allows companies to view estimated footprint of their purchases. So a customer footprint is tracked monthly across different spending categories, which is making them consider purchasing decision. I think right now this calculator is only for companies, but I would love to see this being introduced for customers as well, so that we can see a bigger picture of our purchases and we can kind of see what our purchases entails and just consider things we've never considered before. So I'm definitely looking forward to see what next year's bring.
I agree with you. For sure. I think just even having that, you know, having almost self-accountability, you know, seeing your own calculations and what it is makes you a lot more, you know, aware of things like that. So yeah, 100% agree. Something that I saw, a famous name some people may know, is Bastin, previous world champion in Formula One. So, you know, in his last year of Formula One, which was last year when he finished, of course, they call it like the biggest circus in the world. They go over to, you know, like 15 different countries across pretty much all of the continents. And you know, it's like 23 to 24 races a year, and you can imagine how many flights it is. And pretty much for half of the roster, he just traveled by car, you know, with a few friends all around Europe, and all of the other superstars, you know, drivers, teams, all flying massive jets, private jets, you know, getting ferries over to put all the equipment around. But he made sure that he was just driving in a fuel efficient car all across Europe, you know, driving 10 hours, 12 hours plus to get to the next place, whilst everyone else is flying privately. It's something that, you know, he was really trying to make an impact on, and something that, yeah, just jogged my mind there. So a bit of insight, but maybe go and have a little look at that. He's yeah, an awesome guy, very passionate about it as well, which is nice to see. Again, leading from the front, from, you know, using their name for good, which is nice. So next point I wanted just to run on to, so I'll point this one to you, Karen, is, you know, what sort of challenges do you maybe foresee for different founders and creators bringing their green products to the market?
Well, like, despite the growing demand for sustainable and ethical solutions, there's tons of challenges out there, like regulatory complexity, you know, navigating the complex landscape of ESG regulations and reporting requirements can be very challenging. So different regions and industries may have very standards and compliance expectations, you know, requiring like creators to stay informed and adapt to their products accordingly. There's problems of greenwashing concerns, you know, like as ESG gains a lot of popularity, there's that risk of greenwashing where companies falsely claim to be, you know, more sustainable or ethical than they are. And founders need to ensure that their ESG products are genuinely aligned with their claims to maintain trust with consumers and, you know, people looking to invest. Access to, you know, capital, consumer education, you know, the creators may need to invest in educating consumers about the value of their ESG products, building awareness and understanding of the environmental, social, or governance benefits. And it just brings to mind an example. So this happened a couple of weeks back while I was in Tesco, and I I saw a couple standing on the aisle where they had, or just looking at different bulbs, and they had two different bulbs in their hands. One was about maybe 25 or 27 quid thereabouts, and one was about 7 quid. And the more expensive one was like that energy saving kind of bulb, and the other one was just the ordinary one. And we were puzzled looking at bulbs, it still seems screw type of bulb. Like, what's the difference? Why is this so expensive? And it was interesting to see them, you know, just put back the expensive one, just walk away with the, you know, the cheap one. So it's one of those things where, you know, how are you going to convince people to go for, you know, anything that's energy saving, even if it's like more expensive? There's also like the competitive market. ESG market is becoming increasingly competitive as more entrepreneurs recognize its potential. So there's that, you know, issue there with new entrants needing to differentiate themselves, you know, by offering something unique or compelling, you know, when it comes to ESG solutions. So yeah, despite, you know, all of these challenges, there's also significant opportunities for founders and creators in the ESG space, given the growing awareness and demand for sustainable products. Overcoming all of these obstacles here often require a combination of like innovation, commitment, effective communication, you know, being able to build that trust and credibility in the market.
100%. I think, you know, with obviously drawbacks, you know, do come obviously, opportunities as well. There is obviously, as you said, a lot of room for growth, and I'll stay with you on that one, Karen, if you may. So, I mean, what would you say in terms of what are the sort of key considerations then that you should make when beginning to create a tech product, with a sustainable focus? I know you mentioned a few. Is there anything else that you'd say that, some of the...
Yeah. So choosing materials that can be reused and recycled, listening to the customer's needs and aligning your, ethos with the ESG goals. Build products with relentless focus on ESG. Prioritizing sustainability and inclusion. Creating, green IT environments. There's a long list. Prioritizing technology investments based on, top material issues that you can identify or be able to identify as most important to future success. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And I know there's somebody on this call, and I'll come to you, Aaron, who has a potential personal story of, creating and executing or working on, a green product.
Yeah, it started off in a bit of an interesting way. So my brother actually is from the construction industry, and that's kind of been his wheelhouse for a long time. And he had an idea for detecting leaks in a more intelligent way. The less intelligent way being the drip landing on your head, the more intelligent way being an alarm or something going off instead. And the progressiveness in IoT and the introduction of smart meters, he had an idea, and he eventually approached me, and we explored what we could do with it. And he worked in the initial iterations with some friends and partners, and then eventually to turn it into a SaaS platform. He asked me for my expertise, which were minimal at the time. I was only a couple of years out of college at the time. But essentially what he created was a company called Aquatrace. And what it was, and what it still is a leak detection system that you can lay kind of like a 2D grid. And the way it works now is actually exclusively in conjunction with Kingspan True Mind Materials. So I'm sure everybody's heard of Kingspan. Their branding is all over Dublin Airport. They're a primary partner of Aquatrace. And what essentially happens is the foil-back installation gets clips put together, and a light conductive circuit is created when water bridges the two surfaces of the installation, right? It's magic. Essentially, that triggers an alarm. We send texts and we send push notifications. We let people know it starts leaking. Because typically, and this was the problem, when a leak happens, it'll happen about 50 meters away. And by the time you see it, it's actually so bad, it's nearly destroyed the roof. That's the typical experience. Anybody with a mortgage is deathly afraid of their shower leaking, for example. And this is why it's such a destructive material, water. But yeah, also is like the lifeblood of society. So what's really, really cool is Aquatrace was able to do a bit more. By adding more sensors to the IoT board that we built, we were able to detect the actual thermal performance of the building and how that degrades over time and how it degrades with the introduction of water. And we can do obvious things like detect if there's a fire inside of the installation, which is unfortunately what happened in some very public disasters over the last couple of years. But crucially, and probably most impressively, is that we stumbled into this being a progressive technology. And that, when I talked about the green roofs and purple roofs before, it was only when Jer seen that and his deep, rich industry experience and kind of collaborating with me, who completely blind and naive to this domain, were we able to come up with something that worked. And it's been hugely successful. The Fibonacci headquarters, which Facebook handed the keys back to a long time ago now, because of COVID-19, has it in both the basement and the roof. Most of the data centers in Europe are being built in collaboration with Mind Materials, and Kingspan have it on it. And that's not just because if you destroy a server blade, you could be destroying 50 million euros worth of data, never mind the hardware costs. It's also because that roof has to be replaced at some point, and we want to keep those buildings going as long as we possibly can. We don't want to be building buildings that are going to need to be rebuilt or refreshed unnecessarily often. So it was a really cool experience. I took the opportunity to bow out of it when when we started working with Kingspan and My Materials, and that was just a personal thing. There's loads of really amazing familial Irish co-founders of businesses, and me and my brother are not one of them. We are very much brothers in the typical sense, and we fight like cats and dogs sometimes. And he's a wonderfully experienced individual who I'm deeply proud of. He's been a mentor and a real guide for me in my career. But I've been really excited seeing what Acrotrace's been able to do since. And I think that's what companies need to do, is just open themselves up to more opportunities to succeed, frankly, because they might not know what they have. You know, I wonder about companies like Ring or like or Nest, who have obviously got an agenda to try and create a more progressive and environmentally aware environment for their consumers. But what are they missing with their data? Like, I even look at something like the SIMI reports, because cars is obviously my thing. Like, why is the government not using the registrations that we have now to govern how we incentivize people to buy cars? Like, it's really obvious, no VRT in electric cars. That's cool, but there's not actually enough lithium in the world for us to build enough for everybody else. What happens if we encourage people on a local basis to make the right decisions? What if the VRT was lower in Galway? Because you practically have to drive further than everybody in Dublin too. That's just a reality. So if you buy a car, register in Galway and drive and live there and are governed like ESG demands, why can we not be clever with that data? And the data is available. Anybody not working on a current hackathon project, check out the city website, check out the CSO. It's a body of information we could do a lot with. But I think we should be incentivizing and to the previous point and question, encouraging people to be self-governed and because we've shown that when we give people are naturally altruistic. When we give people the tools to succeed and be positive change, they more often than not, they do. You know, not everybody is getting their private flights tracked on Twitter. I think Elon and Taylor Swift were the two big ones that I remember, right? Most people are trying to do the right thing. We just need to give them the tools to succeed and know what we have. And that's the hard bit. Who knows how, I mean, the growth in technology companies that are approaching this space means that we're not quite sure what a consolidation of them would look like. The obvious analogy I'm trying to get at is there's loads of different ways to charge your car in Ireland. There's Tesla superchargers, there's the Ionic network, ESB have a network. That's all well and good. And there's a bunch of different plugs, loads of different standards emerging. And there's already attempts to consolidate that into one app you get it from, right? The Netflix style thing again. And we've been through this before, and we should go through it again. We should opt into this. Companies should be welcoming when someone comes along and says, well, hey, I can charge my Hyundai in the same place you charge your Tesla. And we see that in the US, right? They've all switched to Tesla supercharging. So that's the physical manifestation. There's room for that to happen in the software world too.
Love it. And yeah, I think definitely, as you said, it's just, keeping that, as you said about even just the charging points, keeping that progression going, you know. And yeah, government needs to give us a little bit more flexibility on that and allow us to sort of push on with that, I think, from our end. But also, an awesome story, you know, all around sort of ESG as well, and something very close to you. So thank you, Aaron. And now we're segueing into the sort of final parts of the conversation. And the last poll that I'd like us to launch in a second is all around the importance of when it comes to sort of the data, the reporting, the tracking side. So I think we'll probably see that pop up in just a moment again. For everybody online, if you can just get ready to vote on our final poll of the evening. Should be with us any second now. For anyone that can hear it, I've got a dog barking in the background, so apologies for that. The joys of doing a webinar at home. So apologies if there's any background.
You'll have to pay the dog tax at some point. We'll have to see the dog on camera now.
Yeah, that's he may pop over in a moment. He's currently in the garden, but nonetheless, so the poll question that we'll launch in a second is all around how important do you think data and reporting are when considering ESG? So you've got very important, somewhat important, not important, and I'm not sure. So it'll be with all of you in just a moment. But as we're waiting for that to pop up, a question I have, and I'll direct to Klaudia this time. So something I've seen via KPMG is they recently spoke about how there are no standardized definitions of ESG reporting. So, data can also be sort of voluntary, inconsistent and difficult to compare. But, with that in mind, do you think tech products can be used to help improve this, sort of common problem?
If I were to reply to the poll, I would say ESG reporting for me is very important. For me, ESG reporting enables companies to be transparent about. I think we have the poll there.
We've got it here.
It allows companies to be transparent about the risk and opportunities they faces. A lot of times it's considered as a communication tool, maybe even a storytelling tool, because a lot of time companies use this tool to kind of tell a bit more about themselves, just what they're doing that we as customers may not even know about. I also believe in an idea that whatever gets measured gets managed. So that tool allows businesses to adjust their strategies, policies, just to comply with the ESG values. And we also need to remember that nowadays customers and investors, they're much more smarter. They expect comprehensive data nowadays. In many industries, it is a severe reputation risk if you actually fall short or do not disclose ESG reporting. I've read a survey done by PwC from 2022, I believe, and 79% of responders actually confirmed that they consider ESG reporting when making their investment decision. So I think it kind of tells you something how important the ESG reporting is for investors. And besides the willingness to storytell, it is actually becoming now a legal necessity to disclose regular reports on social and environmental risks that company faces. And when it comes to the standardized definitions for ESG reporting, I think it's still pretty challenging for companies to obtain a reliable data. If you think of it, the data come from all many different internal departments. And after collecting the data, there's also another task, which is combining the data sets from all different businesses into one. And traditional methods of analyzing ESG data can often be ineffective, inaccurate, and as we all know, manual processes are time-consuming and they're prone to human error. And that is where I think technology is and will continue to be a powerful tool. As I said, obtaining this data is rather hard for companies. So I think there are many different digital ESG reporting tools that can offer a centralized database for more convenient data gathering. And another pretty obvious one is the AI. So AI algorithms, they can also analyze unstructured data or the text data. That would be, for example, the social media data, news articles, and corporate reports. AI system can also analyze extensive data sets and identify a correlation between ESG metrics and financial performance. So I'm definitely looking forward to see what technical our tech can do with regards to ESG reporting and how it can be more structurized.
Perfect. For sure, I think definitely, as you mentioned there, that it is just so important. I think companies need to really be utilizing it. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, Aaron, at all.
I think it's spot on in reality. Like I think we're on. This is the point I think we've all been hammering home, is that we're on the cusp of figuring out what we do with this huge amass of technology that we've produced, and like. We're a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Many of the problems that we face around data centers and increasing emissions are coming from our own industry, and it's nice to see us leaning back into it. That would be the main piece I would add on. I think it's only right that we're the people who try and get ahead and fix it, because ultimately, if we do things right as a society, data centers are probably going to be one of the biggest things that produce energy in the next 10 to 15 years, as we hope to see. At the moment, it's transport, right? It's a no-brainer. And I think agricultural, but I think we're getting there. Ireland has a pretty good track record of managing agriculture. Certainly in the free range, we don't have the factory farming that exists in some parts of the world. But leaving agriculture aside, because you can't yet make robot chickens, we're getting there. But we're on it. It's not quite there. But the transport sphere is moving in the right direction. Maybe not as quick as we need, but we're seeing companies like Volkswagen committing to not producing combustion engines after 2030. All right, cool. So who's left? And that's really us, right? We're left holding the bag, and it's nice to see us being progressive. So to Claudia's point, I think she's spot on. I think it's time for us to step up and start figuring out how we can collate all this data together and start producing real insights for people to act on and be held accountable to.
100%, 100%. And in terms of obviously, just to summarize everything that we've discussed, and I think we've got just over 5 minutes. So I'd like to close out with a couple of points. And I think what I'd really like to do is to sort of bring things, to summarize, but also to benefit all of our students on the call as well. So Aaron, a question for you. Are there any sort of online resources that our audience can draw upon, for any inspiration or guidances on learning more about ESG, and particularly maybe sustainability in tech, to get those ideas going ahead of their projects that they'll be building? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the best place you can search for this kind of information is going to be in your local your local centers. And what I mean by that is, you can look to the really big beat conferences that exist around the world. And of course, I attend them because that's my job. I have to learn about progressive technologies. But if you go to some of the more, this may be a controversial one, but if you go to some of maybe the less obvious conferences, you may find the opportunity to work and collaborate, or maybe the next idea was there. Because it's funny enough, like Acrotrace really touched on its ESG because we were at a conference, a construction conference, nothing to do with technology, trying to sell roofing tech to people who had no interest in it whatsoever, and we stumbled on it there. So this can come from the most interesting of places, and I think we need to broaden our horizons when we look at that. So if I were doing this now, if I was tackling this problem, I would pick a domain I want to address. So the motor trade, transport. I want to track private jets globally. I want to see what the average quantity of fuel produced or delivered to a county is, and how can I offset that and change it? Can I provide that kind of governance? I want to see what the data centers are like per capita. These questions. Pick an industry like that, and then don't search software in that. Search for problems that people have. And more often than not, you'll realize that, I don't want to give the goose away, right? But more often than not, you'll realize that those problems can or are already attempting to be solved by someone. And then you can either do it better, which is a very valid approach. That's how most of the software industry works. Or you can do it first, which is a surprisingly difficult thing to do, actually, because good ideas tend to spawn from a lot of people at the same time. So there are your options, right? Try and find a problem within a domain totally separate to where you are, or what you work in, or what you're, pick the non-obvious approach, and then try and find a problem being solved, or a problem that absolutely needs to be solved that can be solved with software. That would be my way of tackling it. It's not an obvious one, but hopefully it's more clarity than just pointing at Google and saying, find problems that people need solved.
It's awesome. I think definitely people are going to be taking away a lot from this session. And again, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We've got probably about just over 2 minutes. So we will be moving into a networking session for anybody that would like to come and join us. There'll be a little bit more collaboration going on there. It gives a chance for anybody that may have any questions to come pick anybody's brains, or even just to come and say hello ahead of meeting people on Saturday. So if there are any more questions that people do have, feel free to come and join us. You should see that there is a link in the diary. Here we go. Alfie has shared that through to everybody. So we will jump on there in just a moment. But yeah, I just want to say, looks unfortunately we're out of time. We've got about a minute to go. So I just want to say a massive thank you to Aaron, Klaudia, and Karen for joining us, and thank you to everybody at home that has tuned in. They're always interesting discussions, always having fun, and some reason we always seem to have very interesting panels. So that's always something that's nice. And yeah, it's been a good discussion. I hope everybody's gained some benefit, even if it's just one or two little snippets of information or ideas that they have. So for everybody else that's on here, you know, there is a Zoom link to come and join us at 7 p.m. I'll give you 1 minute if anyone wants to go toilet break, grab a quick glass of water, and we can all jump on there in just a moment. But yeah, and the panelists, yeah, if you're going to come and join us, we'll see you in a minute. But yeah, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.